Finance Committee meeting for 7/14/2020 to order. And computer just went blank, but do roll call. Here we go. Okay. Alder Johnson.
Here.
Alder Galvin.
Here.
Dorf is here. And Alder Corpus Dax is excused. I will entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Move to approve by Alder Johnson, second by Alder Galvin. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Regular business. 1, for consideration and possible action to pay off 2018 and 2019 Board of Commissioners of Public Lands State Trust Fund loan for a total of $3 million. Staff.
Hello all. Yes, what you have in front of you, there is in your packet included a letter that we would like to submit to the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands to pay off, actually it's 2 loans. A loan we took out in 2019 for $1 million, that was for neighborhood enhancements. We also took out another loan in 2018 for $2 million, and that was for the shipyard. Or whether it was because they were taxable or because there was time constraints, we ended up taking out state trust fund loans. At this time, working with Baird and Associates, they were able to come back and say that if we take the $2 million and refund it, we could save money for the TIF. And then the other one, which is the neighborhood enhancements, we actually, between fund balance and premiums that we've received from going out for our latest bonds, we would have enough money to pay this off, reduce our outstanding debt, and in the long run, save us on interest. What we need to do though is there's a timeline we have till I think toward the end of I can't remember exactly, to send this letter to the state trust fund loan to the Board of Commissioners and let them know that we're interested in this, and then they could give us some exact information on when and how we could pay this off. On the line, we also have John Meehan and from Baird and Associates, and he could help explain if you have any more questions on this item or the following 2 items where one of the items is where we're going to refund or refinance this $2 million loan that we're looking to pay off.
Alders, Alders, do you have any questions?
If it's appropriate, I would just make a motion to approve this item contingent on the successful passage of the next 2 items.
Yeah, that sounds
I'll
good.
second that.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, all right. Number 2, for consideration and possible action of refunding $2 million BCPL State Trust Fund loan for TID 22.
Okay, in this case, I am going to turn it over to John Meehan and to explain the $2 million item that we just had a state trust fund loan that we would like to now refinance. There is something in your packet. It's a refinancing proposal, and I am going to let John talk to this item.
That's great. Good afternoon, everybody. Diana, do you have so they all have the packet, which was that I had sent you about 8 pages or so?
Correct. Yes. I can put it up in front of you, but yes, the packet in front of them at the number 2 is the $2 million refunding.
Right.
Super. If you wouldn't mind, could we maybe walk through because I
Sure.
have it reverse order. It's really to talk about item number 3 and then to talk about item number 2.
Should we, can we amend the agenda?
I'm sorry. I could just do it. I could just cover the other one. That's okay.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, if you go to, in the handout that we sent, page 7.
It's going to be right in our packet. We separated it, so you're going to.
Okay.
It's all the backup that we have supporting number 2 item.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And the intro page, it says refinancing of the 2018 state trust fund loan.
Yes.
As a description of the current issue, as Diana was saying, it was for, I think initially for TID 5, now TID 22. Mm-hmm. It was in the amount of $2 million. it's considered to be taxable debt. So any refunding of it would be with a taxable debt issue. Now, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, you conducted a sale, an issuance of some taxable notes. So we're very familiar with the bond market right now for taxable notes, very attractive. And what we're looking at doing is taking the maturities 21 through 28, which carry right now a 4.25% interest rate, and refunding those, and I'll get to the restructuring, because the call provision that Diana was referring to is the state trust fund. One of the attributes of the state trust fund is they allow you every year a window to call debt and pay off if you wish, as long as you give 30 days notice and it's done prior or on August 31st. So what we're looking at, I'll get to a timeline, is by July 31st, a notice would go to, the notice would go to the state trust fund saying, on August 31st, we're going to pay your debt off. We're going to pay it off. So if you kick to the next page, what we're proposing to do is that the amount of debt that's outstanding is it's $2 million and whatever interest cost. And so the proposed issue size is about $2,085,000 because of interest cost of issuance, et cetera. And have the structure set up so the repayments are from April 1, 24 through April 1 of 2038. So we're extending the debt. And we're doing that because this is TID 22 shipyard debt. So we're trying to have the TIF match, the life of the TIF match this debt. That's why we're going to be extending it. And we're taking advantage of today's low interest rates by going from 4.25% interest to an estimate of slightly over 2%.
It's really
So
good.
even though we're extending the debt, the rates are so low that we're able to do that. And because of the structuring, overall, there's still a saving. So it's the advantage that it's a current refunding. You can do it as long as you give notice. You have a higher interest rate on it, 4.25%, which is about two times plus what the market is right now for taxable debt. We could give some cash flow relief to TID 22, which I think is important, and to still have the debt paid off with an overall 20-year life. Now, as far as where interest rates are, slide to the next page. These are the U.S. Treasury rates. And I mention this only because taxable issues are priced against U.S. Treasuries. Someone who buys a taxable bond says, well, I could buy a U.S. Treasury and sleep well at night. So anything that I don't buy, there's a Treasury rate to it. So when you look at Treasury rates, it's Treasuries plus something. And they look at the plus saying, okay, is it a 5-year maturity, which are the purple bars? Is it a 10-year maturity, which are those green bars? And there's also, I could have gone with a longer maturity too, but the idea is that right now, as you can see, Treasury rates are pretty low. And that becomes the index that buyers look to. So as that 5 and 10-year bounces around, so will the interest rates on the final sale. Okay, get to the next page. Now, we were mentioning about the structuring of the debt. If you look on the left side of the page, that's the before refinancing. That's where you are right now. Now, there's other TID 22 debt outstanding, but the state trust fund loan, and that's at 4.25%. And what we're doing is on the right side, we're saying, okay, we want to have cash flow relief, so we want to reduce the annual payments. So we would go 3 years interest only, once again, because we wanted the TIF to start generating revenue to cover debt service, and then extend it out for an overall life not to exceed 20 years from the start date, 2018. So in some cases, what happens is actually there's a savings in early years, but that's only because you're pushing the debt from an early maturity to a later maturity. And once again, you know, we still generate an overall savings, but the reason we're doing this structure, cash flow relief for TIF 22.
I just ask a question about on this page.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. I'm looking at the gross savings or loss, and I'm seeing 86,956. Is that the difference between the original deal and the refinance deal?
Yeah, that's really just exactly. It's looking at the original structure and taking it the refinance structure and to say, well, it really cost you $90,000 to do it, but because you get so much in savings up front, the present value generates an overall math test of saying, well, there's really a savings on a present value basis. But you're absolutely right. The fact that you had debt that was being paid off and now is being restructured over the 20-year, it comes out to about a $90,000 hit.
So the savings is the cash flow relief?
Exactly.
Okay, so it's kind of, and the reason I bring that up is because we're really going to pay more for this, but we just have to make a determination if the cash flow relief is worth the $87,000.
Exactly. And I think what it comes down to, Alderman, is that it's a matter, if you do nothing, you have to make the payments. And then it's the source of making the payments on the existing state trust fund. Do you take it? Well, you don't have enough TIF revenues from 22. So you really have to take it out of the general levy, of the general money to make the payments. Right. And so by doing this, we're not borrowing new money. We're not issuing new projects. We're saying we're structuring it so that the cash flow relief is to the levy and that the TIF would support itself. That's the concept.
Thank you.
That was a very good explanation. I really appreciate that. So Alders, discussion.
Like a no-brainer.
Okay. Alder Johnson, do you have some concerns yet?
No, I didn't have concerns. I just wanted
okay.
that everybody was clear on what we were voting on, and that, I mean, this is going to cost us more in interest long-term, but
Yes.
obviously the short-term relief is what's really necessary in our fiscal position. So yes, I support this. This is
right.
cash management 101.
Great. Who would like to make a motion?
I would move to approve.
Second.
And in further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So item number 2 has carried. Now back to my agenda. Item number 3, for consideration and possible action of refunding taxable 2010 general obligation purpose bonds, BABS.
By way of an explanation, in last year, we did the same step. Last year, you had debt, which was issued in 2009 under what was then known as the American Resource Recovery Act. And communities, school districts, states, towns had the ability to issue Build America bonds, BABs. And what a BAB is, it's debt that could have been issued tax exempt. But since the Fed was willing to give you some reimbursement on the debt service if you issued taxable, because if they had taxable debt outstanding, that's less tax exempt debt that avoids paying taxes to the Treasury. So in 2010, similar to 2009, you issued bonds. And at that time, it was financially beneficial to issue BABs and to take the subsidy. The remaining maturities, because now we've hit a call date. It was a 20-year issue, and we've hit the 10-year point, you have a call. Your option is you can leave it as taxable debt, and still get some subsidy, or you can convert it to tax exempt and take savings. The remaining debt are the years from now till 2030. And the interest rates on those bonds, because remember, it was taxable back in 2010, the interest rates is 4.75 to 5.5%. Now, once again, we just had a sale just a few weeks ago, and we saw how the tax exempt bonds sold. So we are looking to say, well, the redemption provisions here allow you to call these at any day with 30-day notice. Flip to the next page, Diana, please. And if we did that, we could issue, just like we did last year, refunding bonds. The approximate amount, $7,615,000, sounds sort of actual, but that's the approximate amount. They're tax exempt. They're non-bank qualified because of the amount of debt you issue in a calendar year. the maturities don't extend past the original issue. That original issue had a final payment in 2030 structure. The true interest cost we have on there, the true interest cost is coming in at, it looks a little bit fudgy to see, but it's like about a 1.37%. So that's why. And so are about 80,000 plus a year.
And we're not paying it any longer. It's the
No.
same amount of years.
Same
Wow.
amount-
This
And
is a
it's
good one,
because,
right?
yeah, it's because we hit a call date now, and because
Okay.
we're going from to tax exempt, which are allowed to do. Just like we did last year with the 2009 bonds. So
Remember,
the
John?
savings are pretty significant.
John, just one, can you just explain what the call date means? Someone would say, why didn't we do this earlier?
Oh, sure,
I
sure.
know what that means.
The call date is that as of a certain date established at the time of issuance, and in this case, the call date was set up for April 1 of 2020, we tell bondholders, you're protected. Any bonds you hold, they stay intact until that date, and then they may be taken away from you. They may
Okay.
be released, maybe paid off, they may be refunded, whatever. Or they may sit outstanding, because after all, you don't have to do anything. You can keep paying if you want to. But the bondholders know that it's likely to be taken away from them. And frankly, if they go into the secondary market to sell their bonds, I don't care if they own the 2030, 2029, whatever year they owe, it's priced as if it's going to be taken away from them. The
Okay,
expectation is, yeah, you got a call date. If I buy these bonds from you, I may get paid off next week. So the call date is at your option, and it's factored into the pricing. Okay, next page. Now, as far as where interest rates are, and I apologize, I know this is a really busy chart as things have bounced around. This is a tax exempt chart as opposed to the treasury one we looked at. And once again, you look low to the right side and you see how interest rates have come down. I don't feel bad at all about when we did this in 2019. We were pretty darn low there. I'm glad we didn't try to do this in March of 20. You can look at that spike in the air.
whoa.
But where we are now, it's an attractive to take these out.
Yep.
And once again, this is that's a 5 and a 10-year chart. See? As opposed to the state trust fund loan, these are financed to their original maturity of 2030. So you can look on the left side, which also takes into account, remember I mentioned that the BABs get a subsidy. So every April and October, you actually receive a payment from the feds.
Mhm.
And that's the area where it says BAB subsidy. Now it's a changing amount, but you get a subsidy. And so the math is, given your existing debt service, given the reimbursement you get from the state, where are you? And are you better off giving up the subsidy and reducing your interest cost? Which is, you move to the right side and we say, no more subsidy, no more taxable debt. Now we have a tax exempt debt. And based on that, after cost of issuance, where do we end up on the right side? And that's where we get those savings of 80,000 plus a year.
Okay,
One thing I want to add to this, I don't have the breakdown, but it is, this will affect a couple different funding sources. It would be both general fund, I think it's sanitary and storm, and there might be a TIF in there. So this 80,000 for like 2021 budget would be allocated through over several different funding sources. But again, it's going to help anyone who has this outstanding debt. It's going to reduce the amount that they owe in 2021 and future years.
Alders, any questions?
Yes, so you said it's going to affect this, or affect those three organizations for how long?
Really, we'll see savings starting in 2021 of a total of 80,000. It'll be split based on what they have left as outstanding balance, and it'll go through 2030. So over the next 9 years, we'll in total have about $859,000 worth of savings over those funding sources.
And how will they make up that difference then?
There's no difference. What it means is that when we have to to pay an interest. We will send less money in to pay these bonds off.
Oh, okay, so it's,
We
There
will
will
have
have more money. Yes.
that's a
Yeah.
plus, well, we'll have
We'll have
more,
more money.
more's
Yes,
better,
it's
yes.
a
Yes.
good thing. Yes. Good question.
So the
Alder
last,
Johnson?
the last item, Alder Galvin, I felt like had a choice, meaning, do you want to spend, the $87,000 to keep the payments off the levy? That one had a
Right.
choice. This one to me is an authentic no-brainer.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
I would move to approve this.
All right.
I'll second that.
All right. Moved by Alder Johnson, second by Alder Galvin. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Fabulous. So does that mean that motion one carried too, right? Because we now just carried the last two? Yes. All right. We are
Thank you,
in.
John.
Can I ask one other thing, and if you wouldn't mind, Diana, go back to the timeline there, just for the benefit of the committee, just to roll through, and I'll do this very quickly. Talked about it. The official statement it's in really good shape because we just did a financing, so we're updating the official statement. It's but I assume it goes to Common Council as part of initial resolution on the 21st. That say, yes, go ahead and get this done. By the end of the month, the notice goes from the city to the state trust fund that says, okay, July 31st, we're paying you off on August 31st. We're in. And then we move through that on the August 18th council meeting. We actually sell the bonds, close it on August 31st, and pay off the state trust fund and have the money to pay off the 2010 bonds. So the calendar does work. There's a couple of that involve council action.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, Alders? No? Okay. All right. Item number 4. Thank you so much, Mr. Minns.
Thank you.
That was very interesting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you,
You
too.
too. For consideration with possible action, the acceptance of the Center for Tech and Civic Life grant for $1,093,400. Staff.
All right, probably turn it over to Chief of Staff Jeffries. Very excited that we had some internal staff, the clerk and our Chief of Staff spent some quality time trying to put a grant together to get additional money for our elections for the August and November election, and they were successful. And so what you have in front of you is a copy of the grant tracking form. It has a copy of what was submitted and what the city has been offered. And so really in front of you is to accept this grant of $1,093,400 from the Center of Tech and Civic Life. Celestina, Jeffrey, Chief of Staff Jeffries, are you on the line? Is there anything you'd like to add on this?
Yes,
Or are there any questions from the alders?
Yes, well, I think, let's just start off with some questions. Obviously, we're very excited about this opportunity, and it's a great opportunity to not only meet some of our financial challenges with holding 2 elections in the middle of a pandemic, but also a great opportunity for the clerk's office to upgrade some of their equipment and for us to really conduct some excellent voter outreach. So that's really the gist of it, but you may have some questions. I will say at the outset as well that we will have our first internal staff kickoff meeting with our technical advisor from the Center for Tech and Civic Life. That will occur next week. Alder Weary at the Ad Hoc Committee on Elections had asked a question of, in what way does the grant obligate us financially? It does not obligate us financially. Obviously, this is all about staff time, but this is for staff that are already salaried. And many staff would be engaged in some of this work. Obviously, clerk's office, and then myself in the mayor's office, and we'll probably tap some other people from other internal teams that we have who can really lend a helping hand as well as some excellent thoughts. But as I said, we do have a technical advisor from the Center for Tech and Civic Life, and we will have our first meeting next week. So that's where we are. Any
I
questions?
dealt with this at the elections meeting last Thursday, so I'm pretty familiar. So do you guys have any questions, alders?
I have a few.
Sure.
Okay. First off, Celestine, I mean, congratulations. This is obviously a big win for the city of Green Bay. I do have a few questions that I'd like to maybe just maybe have some information clarified. And I want to be clear from the onset, by no means questions suggest that I'm questioning whether or not we should accept the grant, because everything that I read here, I wholeheartedly support. And I think you guys did a fantastic job with securing this for our community. So you had kind of alluded to it with Alder Wery indicating, financially, are there any obligations? What I'd be curious to know, because I didn't really see it in the information that was provided to us, are there any metrics or outcomes that we are expected to achieve? And if we don't achieve them, is there a penalty?
Excellent question. As the grant was presented to us, that we were not presented with, you must expand the vote by X percent, you must have X absentee ballots back. We were not given any of those metrics. But what our technical advisor will do is to provide us with best practices so that our plans that we have put forward yield the most success. I will have more of an understanding of what that really looks like after our kickoff meeting next week.
Okay, so in the contract agreement that I presume we'll need to sign once this secures approval,
Yes.
Is there any risk of us having to repay any of these funds if we don't meet goals?
I do not believe so, but obviously when we get that contract in, let's put it this way, if there's any kind of payback that we would have to give if we don't meet our obligations, that would be something very serious that the council and quite frankly the staff would need to consider.
Right.
I mean, as you know, there is no such thing as a free lunch, right?
Well, that's why grants exist, right? I mean,
Yes, that's right. Yes, because there are parameters. So all the information that I have right now, Alder Johnson, is that would not be a clawback provision. There would not be monies that we would need to pay in order to match a grant. There's no matching requirement. Obviously staff time, but that goes with all grants pretty much. But certainly, if I have any indication after our kickoff meeting next week that there is some sort of clawback provision, that is something I will make aware to our senior staff and then right away to council.
Okay.
But I do not anticipate that.
Okay, and I appreciate, the fact that obviously staff will look at that. Let me see, there were just a couple other questions I had written down that I know I had answered as I was reading through the application. But one thing I noticed is that proportionately speaking, we were investing quite a bit less on absentee voting compared to the other communities, and quite a bit more on expanding outreach, with the exception of Racine, perhaps. Could you maybe just elaborate on that? Because from the outside looking in, the suggestion might be that we're putting more fuel on the fire as opposed to kind of controlling the fire first. And so I'm just looking for some perspective on that.
So I think, certainly when we submitted what we thought would be best, we submitted it not knowing what the other communities were going to do. And I also saw that the proportions were different. This is what I imagine we will tackle in our conversation with our technical advisor as to where should we actually put our best efforts. As I said, what was approved in the grant was what we asked for. We wanted to do that outreach. We wanted to make sure, because like I said, you see in the grant, there's a voter universe of about, we have about 52,000 registered voters. And so we felt that was important. Additionally, we have quite a bit in equipment. I know one community, there are definitely differences. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing what our technical advisor advises us to do, you know, whether or not there'll be, okay, great City of Green Bay, you're going to do, you know, 5 out of the 7 things, but I think what you should do is maybe look at another community's plan and copy that. I really don't know. Like I said, we gave what we thought was best, especially for our community, and each community is different. And so, yeah, I look forward to what that conversation is going to look like. I mean, we've already invested some money. We had $10,000 in terms of a planning grant from this whole endeavor, which was essentially to put everything together. And we've already, you know, from a finance committee meeting, maybe 2 meetings ago, the purchase of a ballot folder, and the ballot folder and there was another piece of equipment, which.
Two drop boxes.
Thank you. And the drop boxes, thank you. So, you know, so we took some of that money and that initial $10,000 and immediately bought equipment. We've also taken some money and we immediately sent out forgive me, everyone, I'm a little tired from last night. Sorry. Yes. We immediately, you know, have put out a piece of mail for everyone to get everyone knowing, hey, you know, your polling location may have changed, encouraging absentee voting, encouraging registration online. So, you know, we also put quite a bit of money into advertising. So long story short, Alder, is that I will see what happens with the technical advisor. Those updates will happen at the ad hoc committee because that's the best place for them. And then the ad hoc committee report goes to the city council as to what is actually happening and what the plans are and what the best practices are that our technical advisor. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I fully expect, obviously, that every community has different, you know, challenges and needs. And so I think, you know, your initial comment about how you didn't necessarily do this benchmarking and comparing to every community really kind of helps answer that question.
Okay.
You know, which kind of goes into, you had mentioned that we had a lot of equipment purchases. And originally one of my questions was looking how on election day, ours seemed very high. And then I looked into the detail and saw that a big part of that was because of the equipment purchases. So yeah. I was actually really happy to see that. On page 11, this is really more of just a question. There was it's talking about the processing of ballots. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that Milwaukee and Green Bay are going to spend about the same amount of money, $145,000. One thing, though, that I noticed was that we are spending 140 of that, I believe, on labor for this year, whereas Milwaukee is spending that money on equipment to fully automate their process, which I presume is equipment that you can use then year over year into the future. Mm-hmm. Is that something that we had considered? And if not, is that a viable adjustment that we could make? Does that make sense?
So I would say that, you know, without getting into the details of Milwaukee's plan, because what we put is a little bit more in my head, we actually put in for electronic poll books, which are rather costly. That's not going to be something that we can actually put in place for this election cycle. So I'm not sure if that's going to go forward. We also put in for, like I said, we already bought the ballot folder. We will buy that very quickly. But then the DS450 tabulator, which is a $60,000 piece of equipment, which helps it process very quickly. We do actually need labor in order to really make this election work, both ahead of election day, on election day, and then after election day. I also noticed that one of the communities is going to pay their venues more money. That was not something that we put in. You know, once again, every community is different, but we did put in more money to pay our poll workers more money. So, you know, hopefully I'm addressing some of your observations.
Yeah, maybe more, I guess I pose it as a question, but it could perhaps be issued really more as a statement that if that is, you know, I don't know if that totally eliminates or you know, virtually reduces Milwaukee's labor costs to the point where they're non-existent. But I do think that that was an interesting comparison. And if that is something that we can achieve for the same price, I think it would certainly be something worthwhile to consider. And then the last question that I had was on the item related to poll workers. And I brought this up at a previous committee meeting, and it's recognizing the amount of time and effort that is authentically necessary to recruit poll workers. And, social media posts and appeals and requests, all you want. But at the end, what gets you to a yes is when there's a personal invitation, a personal ask, a personal request to serve as a poll worker. And so I don't know if we've considered trying to reduce some of that burden from our existing staff by hiring, in essence, a poll worker recruiter, but I still think that's a worthwhile item to consider. And so when you're working with the staff from the granting organization, I would still urge us to see if that is a viable solution. And it's not to try to override or overstep anything that the ad hoc committees do. It's doing wonderful work, but it's just coming from my personal experience of recognizing that we still need a lot of poll workers, and it is a ton of work to get. Having a dedicated person in charge of that would be very useful.
I'd like to call on, I need
ahead.
to call on Chris Teskey, because she was raising her hand at the last comment, and I just couldn't break in fast enough. So, Chris, I don't want to get too far away from the last comment, and then we'll go back to Celestine. Okay?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for recognizing the amount of time it takes and the paperwork for poll workers. But my comment was, I read where Milwaukee was going to a system where the labels would be slapped on the envelopes and things like that. It would be automated, which, wow, I'm sure that's going to cost a pretty penny. But I wish I could have called Neil. Neil Albrecht was the head of the commission, and he just retired, I think, last week. And I've been following. They were having a hard time appointing someone. It was very controversial, and I guess they just did that. So I didn't want to interrupt on her just getting into things. But I thought that was really interesting, what Milwaukee was, looking into.
Well, their pretty penny, Chris, is $145,000, the same amount that we've outlined for labor. So that's why that contrast really kind of just drew a flag for me to see if that was something that was worthwhile to pursue. But I'll leave that to you guys to figure out.
And now back to Celestine to answer the question she was about to answer. And sorry, I interrupted. Chief of Staff Celestine Jeffries.
So now you have to tell me the question again.
Exactly, but I have no clue what it was. Okay, poll worker
Recruiter, right. So we did actually, I recognize that sometimes it does take people. So we do have some voter navigators in there as positions. And so, that's a question about the poll worker recruiter. It's very hard. It's hard to keep them as well. And part of keeping people is making the work situation palatable to them. It's a long day. It's not a lot of money, which is why we increased the salary. So I think all that goes into getting and keeping poll workers. And I agree with you, Alder, that's something we're going to need to chat with our grant agency about, looking at some best practices from other parts of the state of Wisconsin, as well as around the country. So I agree.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm Alder Galvin.
Thank you. And Brian, you brought out some very good points. My concern going forward is we've got this grant. It's going to cover a lot of things that prior to the X grant being given to us, we weren't going to be able to do. But 2 years from now, 4 years from now, if we're spending $145,000 on additional staff in that, because who knows what the future holds, is this going to be causing, a lot of budget issues, I would think, down the road where, if we're spending this kind of money later on, for staffing and salaries and everything else like that. These kind of things add up, and I'm just I'm wondering, are we kind of getting ourselves into a situation where in the future it's going to cost us a lot more to run an election? What Brian talks about, some of this equipment would actually probably save us on staffing in the future if we're able to purchase it. And obviously, I think it's too late for us to be purchasing some of it. Those are just comments, questions I have.
So
And then-
let's talk about, let's take these, just in chunks here, because there's going to be too many of them. But, and I know that, let's address your question on paying the poll work. This is an emergency hazard pay. We're not going to be doing this. Is that correct, Diana or Chris?
Well, I can tell you for this time, at this point, it is suggested that we were going to give an increase to the poll workers for these next two elections. We're not calling it hazard pay. It's just an increase in the wage.
Okay.
But
Funded, yeah.
yes, but correct. It really is for just this year because we would not expect to be able to put that amount in our future budgets.
Okay.
And then I think back to Clerk Teske, she has pulled together a list of equipment that she thinks would help make these two elections and future elections more efficient. And that goes back to, as Chief Jeffries says, a high-speed tabulator. We talked about some additional drop boxes, these electronic poll books. If possible, if we could get them this year, we don't believe they'll be able to be installed and implemented for this election, but if those could be purchased with this money, that will help us in future elections. There was other suggestions of more express vote equipment, which we just purchased last year, get enough for if we have more locations. Some additional storage cages for equipment. So there has certainly been some discussion on the equipment that we potentially could buy with this grant that will help us in the long term to make, hopefully, make it more efficient going forward.
Okay, and then I guess also we had already allocated money by the drop boxes and some other equipment. So obviously this will be a savings on our contingency fund.
It wasn't from contingency. It was from a grant, right? The $10,000 grant, right? We didn't take anything from contingency.
Okay, then I guess I misremember it. I thought we were taking some money from contingency for some of this equipment that we were purchasing. Now, I may have misheard it or misremembered it wrong.
What, Diana? Yeah.
Correct. The way the motion was approved is that we were going to pay for the ballot folder, I don't know, somewhere around $4,500, $5,000, and these two drop boxes out of the $10,000 grant, which was really, as they developed this grant, we got $10,000 to participate in this. And there was a better term for that, but that is the money we were going to use. If for some reason that grant didn't come through, we were going to fall back and use contingency. However,
yes.
we have received the $10,000 check. It's in-house, it's in the bank, and we received this additional money.
Okay.
So you were right, Alder Galvin. You were right. You don't hear that at your house very much,
Not
but
very much.
right. But you were right. So very good.
Well, I also just want to say, Alders, and Clerk Teske can also jump in and correct your hedges. I want you to understand exactly how labor intensive an election is. And, some of the things that Clerk Teske has asked for will make that faster, right? But there's a lot of checks and balances that require a human eye, brain, and hand in order to do. And so Clerk Teske can absolutely correct me. I'm not sure we can fully automate ourselves out of this unless there are some other changes in state law. We're going to need people is what I'm saying.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions on this, the grant, item 4? Do I have a motion to accept the grant?
If I could just make one final comment, and I appreciate Chief of Staff Jeffrey's comment about how we can't fully automate ourselves out of this, and I understand that fully. But grants like this don't come around very often, so as much as we can automate ourselves out of it, I think would be great looking long term, because I think, I'm highly suspect that another opportunity like this would come around the next election cycle. So with that, I would move that we accept the grant. However, I'd like to add a contingency that if there is a clawback provision within the contract, that be brought. I'd like to see that maybe brought back to council just for a full understanding of impact of it.
Yes, because if there's a callback, we have to be aware of that if we have to pay something back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that makes
Is there a
sense.
second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion made by Alder Johnson, seconded by Alder Galvin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
All right,
Motion carries. Great. Number 5, report out the acceptance of the We Cares subgrant for $57,535,000. No, wait, no.
57 million.
Sorry.
Whoa, 57
Wait a
million.
minute, that's a period. Okay, $57,535.30. The 30 cents threw me. With allowable uses to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus domestically or internationally for the 2020 federal election cycle. More money for elections.
Correct. I will just start on this one. This is a WEC CARES grant, sub-grant, that the check is in the mail, is in our bank. We have already received the 57,000. So at this point, it's really, we want to report out the acceptance of the grant. Through our grant policy, we would say any grant before you accept it should have gone through committee. However, this is one that really just came to us. It came through, it was offered to us, it was signed, and we have now accepted the grant. So we wanted to report it back out to you. Again, this money is meant to be used for elections.
Do we need to take action on it then?
This is probably received and placed on file.
So
All
moved.
right. Okay, so move,
Second.
second. Okay, Clerk Kachewski.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just have a question because the DS 450 is what we really, really, really want. And we'd like it for November if we could get it. But
Okay.
I don't know, when am I going to have the okay to see if there's any left? I don't know if there is or not. They were holding one for us and then I was told we couldn't. So
Well, then,
I don't want to
okay.
miss out. It
No,
would
I
be,
don't want you to miss out either. Why would we wait? Diana or Celestine, why would we wait?
because there's no money.
Yeah, but now there is money.
There is money, yes. There is no
Yes.
reason to wait. As soon as this has been accepted as of tonight, that money is in-house, and as long as internally between Chief Jeffries and whoever helped, and you helped put the grant together, as long as it's included in there, you have the permission to move forward with it.
Right.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so we're
let me
going to
just-
vote. What?
Can I clarify? Can I ask? So that costs around $61,000.
Correct.
There are going to be maintenance fees yearly in the future.
Okay,
So for my calculation, right now, we only have about $67,000.
We have
Yeah.
we have $1.1 million.
That came in already?
well, it's coming.
Well, I was told I couldn't spend anything until.
Okay,
it was
well,
in-
let's start with a new thing. Let's say we have $67 for sure, which we do. And I think that we would be very justified in not losing that essential piece of equipment.
Okay.
And so I don't know if we need a motion on that or if we're allowed to have a motion on that, but please help me, staff, because I think it's ordered. Chief of Staff Jeffries or Finance Director Ellen Becker.
From what I understand from listening to the ad hoc committee the other night and what's included in the packet, I would say that DS 450, the tabulator at an estimated cost around $62,000 would be included in this grant, and that we should move forward with at least putting the requisition in, working with our purchasing department, verifying, working with a vendor, seeing if one's available, and moving down that line to get that piece of equipment as soon as possible.
Great.
And
It's
I
in
would-
public record now, right? So go forth and do that. Okay.
And I would agree that I think
Thank
it's
you.
really important for us to get this piece of equipment. I just want to make sure that everybody understands. So it seems like we spent double money twice, because the $10,000
all of
grant
it.
was supposed to be spent for, part of that was supposed to be spent for the ballot folder. And so I just want to be sure.
Yeah, part of it
Yeah.
was, but we have enough left.
I just,
Well-
I
So,
I just purchased the ballot folder and the envelope opener today.
Okay, okay.
I didn't do drop boxes yet because Celestine, you made the comment that you wanted to do more than 2. So I thought maybe if we ordered more, we'd get a better deal, maybe.
Sure. Yeah,
So I held off on that, but I got the go ahead with the folder and the opener. So, and that's $4,300. And then with the 61 or 62,
it's perfect. Right, because
Yeah,
we have
that is-
57 plus the leftover of the 10,000.
okay, but then we don't
Okay.
have any for drop boxes until we get more
You
money.
will, yeah, you'll get some. We'll just, one thing at a time. All right, let's have a vote on this motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Great. Chris, go forth and order that. I've wanted you to
Thank you.
order that for months. Okay.
Thank you.
I knew you couldn't. I knew you couldn't. All right. Next, what am I on? No. Number 6, consideration with possible action on the results of a request for information for the revaluation assessment service.
Okay, this is to start the conversation of a revaluation for the city of Green Bay. On the line, we have our assessor, Russ Schwant, and we also have our procurement manager, Calvin Winters, and they help work on this reevaluation RFI, which means a request for information. It was put out to the community, trying to get vendors to see if they were interested in working on and assisting the city with this reevaluation assessment. At high level, it was put out to vendors that 2 vendors submitted responses and 1 vendor was recommended. So again, this is just to start the conversation, looking for feedback, direction from the committee. I don't need to go through the memo exactly, but I wanted to let you know, I'm going to just these are some bullet points that came out of the request for information that was submitted. It was sent out on June 10th. It is for commercial and residential properties within the city of Green Bay. The RFI, request for information, was to assist the city in its financial and time planning for this project. The result of the request of the information could result in a contract award in the future. Because this is a service that this is going to be acceptable, we would not have to go out for a full RFQ or RFP on this request. And then the vendors were to submit their most accurate information. Again, a real quick recap: the city of Green Bay last conducted a reassessment on properties in 2004, and then also due to the recent market changes in the city, we are out of compliance, and now the state is going to require. State statute says we are required to perform a reassessment. So it is something we need to move forward with at this point. It's been on something we've been wanting to do for a very long time, but now we are required to do. We have a few years to make this happen. And so, of course, the city of Green Bay assessors staff would they continue to perform the maintenance and the annual updates that they're currently doing, but we would need additional staff, to either internal staff hired, or we would go out for this for an outside service to complete this assessment. In total, we have about 397 parcels. I'm going to stop there for a moment. We have below on the memo, we talk about an estimated timeline. We talk about what the cost was from this vendor who submitted. But I'm going to actually stop and see if Calvin Winters, our procurement manager, or if our assessor, Russ Schwantz, wants to add anything, or if there's questions right now from the alders to just, again, this is a discussion to move this forward.
All right. Alders, do you have questions, or should we let staff speak first?
I have no questions right now.
Alder Johnson?
I guess I could make one comment. As far as the deadline goes, we have till 2023 to complete the reassessment. That's our drop dead date. And after that point, the Department of Revenue will actually hire an outside firm and bill the city to have it done.
Okay.
This is not for a door-to-door reassessment. This is actually for a statistical reassessment. So that means that we'll be taking the sales and reviewing them versus our assessments and doing a drive-by, basically, reassessment. We'll still be maintaining our current values up until that point, and then switching over to the new numbers all at one time. And while we're doing our current maintenance, we are still going into properties when that's allowed and reviewing those as possible. So when we do our permit work, we're still looking at the entire property, not just that particular piece. So we have been over the past number of years been able to look at the properties and see them from a maintenance standpoint. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't had to do a reevaluation in such a long time. Staff has been able to keep up and keep on top of things, and the market has been helpful to us in that regard too. But at this point now, with the low rates and the way things are getting out of hand, I don't know if anybody's even looked, but anytime there's a house on the market, it sells within a week or two. So it's
Wow.
just amazing with what's going on.
So really, no one is going to go into every single home and look inside every single home in Green Bay for the assessment? Is
No,
that
we're
what
not.
you're
We're
saying?
not doing it. No
Not doing
internal.
that. No, just, okay. I mean, we have to do it. We have to get this done. So Calvin, do you have something?
No, not unless anybody has any questions about the process that we use for this or
Oh.
awarding without going out for a subsequent RFP.
Okay, Alder Galvin, have a question.
I remember the last assessment that occurred, and I had a situation where they came through the subdivision I was in, reassessed all the houses, doing, I believe, the same system you're talking about, merely a drive-by. The valuations went up through the roof, at least in my subdivision. And when I compared it to homes that were built, same square footage, same time frame, but on the east side in a similar subdivision, the valuations were a lot different. When I called the city, I didn't get much of an explanation. When I asked if I could have my house reevaluated, the two people from the city showed up. They walked in my garage, through my kitchen, living room, and out the front door, and dropped the value $40,000. So, I'm just, these drive-by evaluations, I understand we have to do it. It just seems kind of, do we base it on looking at the house? Do we base it on the sale values or what we see as we drive by? I mean,
Well, what we're basing it on is the information we have in our files currently as being accurate. And that's why when we do go out in the field, we're looking at constantly at what we have in our files versus what's in the field. So, and that's what those people that went through your property should have done when they went through it, is make sure that what we had in our files is accurate versus what you have there. If they didn't do it, I apologize. They should have done it at that point, because that's their job. What we're doing, and this is where every community is going just because of the time frame and because of the costs involved, is reviewing sales versus what is out in the actual field. And because of the fact that we don't have the money to do the door-to-door and go through each individual house, when you do have a sale property, you make an attempt to go through the individual sale properties and review that versus what you have in your files to make sure that you have a good base to compare other properties to. And you have to make certain assumptions that people do take out building permits for the work that's done on properties. And then if they don't, that sometimes gets caught up in when people get their notices and they say, well, my neighbor's got this, this, and that in their basement. And you look at it and then there's no permits for that work. So some people will get away with a certain amount of work that hasn't been permitted, but generally we will find out about it in the process. We do review the sales, like I said, and we do have access to MLS records, and pictures do tell us an awful lot because they post a lot of pictures, whether it's for sale by owner or by the MLS. And we keep copies of those pictures, and when we review them, you can tell when somebody's gone from the laminate flooring to, tile floors or hardwood, and they replace their regular countertops with granite or silestone or something like that. Excuse me. And it's those type of things that we've done over the past number of years that has helped us to keep our values kind of in line. But when you get the market going the way it's gone, it's just hard to keep up.
right.
So
And so
we need additional help.
Okay,
Pardon?
so when you say files, you're talking about, you look to see if building permits were pulled and things like that, or if the house was sold and there's some data that you collected from that.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. And you don't need to apologize. I mean, it all worked out in the end. It's just my personal
Well, I
experience with
I
what
was here at the
happened.
time, there's a certain way, a procedure they're supposed to follow, and if they don't, I need to hear about it. And that's something that we learn from, and I hopefully this next time around with this outside help, those things are very helpful in instructing outside staff to do. I mean, if I hear that kind of thing, that's something that I'll pass on to anybody that's working for us.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So in the packet, I did not include the whole RFI that was submitted. There was a lot of detail on how this vendor felt they were going to be able to accomplish one of two things. They gave us two estimated timelines, one with a goal of having assessments done 1/1 of 22, which would mean it would be in effect for our 23 budget, or a year later, 1/1 of 23, and effective for our 24 budget. And in both cases, that would meet our state timeline. So what I put in front of you was the more aggressive timeline. The funding options, I'm just looking through the estimated, the funding options. I'm going to jump down below that. The estimated pricing for option 1 was $388,900, and that did matter if we ended up having a 1/1/22 or 1/1/23 assessment. It's still all the same work. It's just how fast we want to get it done, or if we stretch it out a year. This COVID year, if the assessors may be concerned that maybe this is going to affect some of the pricing, so either way, the pricing for option number 1 is $388,900. Option 2 is included more services. However, I believe the assessor believes that their team can pick up the additional work, that there are some sketches and some other work. So I guess I would be looking for the assessor to admit to comment on that item. They had an option 1 and an option 2.
Yes,
Okay.
option 1. Yeah, option 2. Basically, we have digital sketching that staff has been working on, mainly during our home work from home stuff. And as we've been doing new homes, so on, sketching, and you may have noticed some of those online as you look at our website. Those have been coming on more readily. So that additional monies between the option 1 and 2 is for the outside vendor to take over that work and actually put all the sketches in themselves without our staff doing it. I don't think that's necessary. I think we could save that money internally and do that, continuing that ourselves. Even if that work isn't completed, we still have the statistics as far as the square footage of the buildings and the outbuildings and the attachments that will allow us to price out the properties without even having the sketches there. So I guess it's not a necessary thing that we have to have. It's something that would be nice to have, but it's not something that I think that's required at this point. As far as the timing of it, like Diana said, they do offer a 3-year outside option, and I think the one thing that I see with that as being an advantage to the city is the fact that with the 3-year option, they bill it monthly, so they'd be billing, instead of 24 months, they'd be billing at 36 months, so they'd be saving the city the payments over that period of time. It wouldn't cost any more. There's no interest on it, obviously. So, and then in the interest of the market itself, the longer you go as far as pushing it out, the more you have as far as the sales that are basing your values on. So what I'm looking at is setting it up for an early 2023 valuation timeline, and then giving us enough time so that if we are completed in 2022, that we can pull the trigger and send values out in the fall of 2022. But if something happens where we get there's a cure for COVID or something like that happens and the market kind of settles out, or the interest rates go up or something, and this falls down a little bit, I would hate to have to do a revaluation and then see the market take off or flatten out, where all of a sudden we're going from 100% of market value and then we're going to 110% because everything dies off. I want to give us the option of that extra year so that we can see where we're falling off in the market. And we don't have to use the extra year. It doesn't cost us anything. The deadline is still at that end, but it's there in case it's necessary just to see where we're at. I guess that's my thoughts on it.
So you're in favor of doing it over 3 years then? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Or
I-
three.
3 years would be my
3 years. 2 years.
request, yeah.
Yeah,
It would
okay.
be cost savings to the city as far as not spending the money all in 2 years, and then also give us time to look at where the market's going to be after this whole crisis is over
Okay.
with.
Alders, any other questions?
Just have one, Alderdorf.
Yes, Alder Johnson.
I'm looking at the $20 would be the installment for this year. Was that budgeted?
No, at this point, there's no money set aside in 2020 for this project. So at this point, there is no money set aside. It certainly could be set aside in 2021 into the budgets, or in 22 in future budgets, future borrowing. But at this point, there was no money set aside in the 2020 budget. The only reason why I put it out there the way it is if we want to try to meet the goal of the deadline of 1/1/22, which means would be effective in our 2023 budget. The vendor had asked that we really get started this fall and be able to sign a contract and get started by August, or, by this fall. That would say that they were going to bill us on a equally split it into monthly payments. That would be 4 to 5 months of monthly payments, and that would be about $81,000. That's where I earlier in the memo, I have funding options. Right now, money is not been set aside. We would have to either do contingency, decide if we want to move it back just a little bit back, which means it would go into the following year, the 2024 budget. And then that would allow us to put it either in the 21, 22, and 23 budgets or bar.
It's better to get this done so we get the taxes in 23 rather than wait until 24, right? Isn't that what we're thinking? That valuation would be
Correct. Overall, an assessment isn't necessarily going to bring in more tax dollars. It should just even out the assessment. So if you're anybody who gets their tax bill and their assessment goes up, that doesn't mean, again, more dollars. It just means that their mill rate is going to be lower. And at some point, if their house hasn't changed much, they may actually have the same tax bill. It could go up a little, could go down a little, but it's really not meant to generate more taxes. But you're right, it's been 2004 since we have done a reassessment. And
so why are we in a hurry? I mean, why then would we not wait till we have the money to do this? If it's not going to, what difference does it make then, other than
I just know that it's been for many, many years, we've all had alders asking about reassessments. So
we have, yes, we have, absolutely.
So when it came to the 2020 budget, I promised you, and when we went through the capital improvement plan, that we would bring something back to you this summer, this fall, to have set up, have ready. One, just to find out, we did not know what the cost would be if we went for an outside service. Last 2 years, we tried to put additional staff into the assessor's budget that was pulled back out. If they had 2 additional people for the last 2 years, this probably could have happened around the same timeline, and they could have done it internally. We did not put the employees in. So at this point, we would come back and say what would be the cost if we were to get an outside service to help us do this assessment. And so the vendor has given us the option of either having it done for the 2023 budget or 2024. If we want to do it for the 23 budget, that's when there's a little bit more of a rush. They really want to get started this fall, and then they think in that year and a half they can complete this project. If we want to go to budget, at least the process is in place. The cost is not there. The vendor did not increase the cost. If they went over another year, same work is going to be done. But the payments split out over probably would be split out potentially and we wouldn't have any expense in we could get that contract signed as a 1/1 of 2021 and get started, and then we would be able to put some in our budgets or borrow for it in the future.
Others, it's up to you.
Jen, I'm more comfortable with that, which is why I asked the question, because I think this is a really difficult year for us to try to find $81,000. I mean, with some of the other assessments that we've been making on potential shortfalls or increased expenses, The other piece of this that I do have a question on, I mean, we're talking about roughly a $400,000 expense here. Do we have a policy that dictates when an item must go out to bid?
So the general policy with the procurement manual that was passed last Common Council, anything over $25,000 typically would have to go out for some sort of competitive process, whether that be a bid or an RFP, except in the case of professional services, which this would be deemed a professional service. So medical, consulting, financial, those types of services are exempt from the process. It doesn't mean we shouldn't go out and do that, but it doesn't, there's not a requirement for it. That's why we did a request for information, not knowing what was out there. We wanted to get a feel for what the market looked like. We got back 2 responses, which is, not as many as we would like to see, but in talking with the assessor, we agreed that these may be the only 2 that would respond anyways, given the scope of the project. So I feel comfortable that we have a good feel for what the market is. We got, more than 1 response. And so I would feel comfortable suggesting that we can move forward based on the results of the RFI.
And this RFI, would these numbers stand if we chose not to execute the contract until 2021?
Yeah, that's what you said, Diana, right?
So that would be on the vendor. So there is no, unlike a bid or an RFP where vendors are bound by submitting a proposal or submitting a bid, they're bound for whether it's 60 or 90 days, however we have it written, they're bound to hold their pricing for that long. The RFI does not have that stipulation in it at all. So the vendor could change their pricing. I'm not saying they will, but they are not bound or held to the pricing that they presented in the RFI.
So if we did, if we said, hey, we're not gonna execute a contract till 2021, that gives you a little bit of time to do an RFP, hypothetically. But my fear at this point, and in your experience as a purchasing manager, I want you to maybe walk me through this. My fear at this point is we've now publicly published the prices from the RFI. How does that potentially affect a fair bidding process?
That could have some effect. I don't know. In talking with the assessor and Diana, we agreed that these may be the only companies that were going to submit proposals in the first place. I think, Russ, if you can talk a little bit to kind of the scope here of how big this is and the companies around our area that are able to do it. So yeah, there is a little bit of I don't want to say conflict of interest, but there is a little bit of an issue with having the pricing out there. But at the same time, if this is something that we're going to move forward with just awarding on a professional services contract, there's really not a problem there.
Yes. Okay, Calvin. I appreciate the work that Calvin and Diana have done to move this forward. It's been a lot of work just trying to get this going where it is because it's been so long since we've done this. But I know all the firms that are in the state that do this type of work, and the ones that I've talked to, and I've talked to quite a few of them, just to gauge their level of interest. Generally, what they have is their contracts go out several years now. The state just changed it so that they're able to have contracts that run for 5 years for their maintenance. And generally, a lot of those are inclusive of a revaluation, whether it be for townships, smaller cities, villages, or whatever. So a city the size of Green Bay is kind of a one-shot deal for a lot of these companies, and they lead time in order for them to adjust their other schedules to meet this type of deadline. And a 3-year deadline in 99% of the cases for these other vendors was just too short of a timeline for them to be available to work with us. And that's why we got such a small response for this type of work. I've talked to a lot of them. I begged and cajoled them to try to at least give us a few more bids just to see what's out there. And there was no way that they were able to give us anything, just for the mere fact that they wouldn't be able to do the work even if they were awarded the bid, because it just wasn't enough time for them to do the work and readjust their schedules for the other communities that they service currently. So what we have now, honestly, is the people that we're talking with already work with the city of Green Bay. They are in-house with staff, and they do some other communities also. So we're comfortable with the ones that we have, and they're familiar with the community, and that's why they felt comfortable with making the answering the question. So I don't feel that they'd be the ones that would be changing their numbers if we were to push this off until the next year. I don't think if we were to put out an RFP, would it bring out any additional quotes from interested parties other than those that are unqualified or are just going to take a flyer at something and throw something really cheap out there and waste a lot of time. And that's the one thing that we don't have a lot of is the time to get this going. Starting at such a late date is one of the reasons, like I said, that a lot of these people aren't bidding. So if we're pushing this back 3 months now, just by going into the first of next year, we're going to be cutting off a lot of we're cutting off maybe the option of having anybody do the work. But I think since this company that we're currently working with has expressed interest in doing this, that they would be more than willing to do that, excuse me, work with us to start after the first year. And I'm sure Calvin could talk to them and make sure that that's an option that they're not having a problem with. If that answers the question, Alderman Johnson.
It does, thank you. I think with that, I mean, I would offer up a motion that we engage in a contract with option 1 starting 1/1/21. And I would just reiterate that the reason I'm making my motion that way is because I don't know where we're going to find $81,000 in this year's budget without taking it from contingency fund. But I would also offer up to our assessor that, or to our purchasing manager, that as you work with this vendor, if for any reason the pricing changes on that, I want you to feel comfortable bringing this back to Finance Committee so that we can potentially engage in a conversation about utilizing the contingency fund this year if it does save us money long term.
Absolutely. And the advantage we have with, doing a direct professional services contract here is we have the ability to negotiate, where if we did a bid, we have to take the lowest bidder. We have the ability to do some negotiating here. And if we can get a signed contract in place with that pricing, that would hold them to that at that point, even if it isn't starting until 1/1/21.
Okay. Diana Ellenbecker?
Yep. The only thing, a couple things I just wanted to add. I know I just want to just add a few more things I wanted to comment on. Yes, of course, if we just wait another year to the 1/1/23, which is the 2024 budget, it's just one more year later where your mill rate is just going to be much higher than comparable surrounding municipalities. That's just something to keep in mind. Remember, right now we're at
Yes.
we're at 945. Over the next couple of years, I'm sure it'll go to 960, 980. Potentially hit ours. This would be just 1 year. If we were to complete it 1 year earlier, we would have that your overall our city mill rate would drop. So you would see that drop, and of course that has been what many alderpersons have been asking for a long period of time when we were comparing to surrounding municipalities. The other.
Can I just stop you there? But where can we get this $80,000 then? I mean, just
because that would certainly make me walk back my motion.
Yeah, I think it's really, because things don't seem quite as desperate with all these grants that we've gotten, and we can cover elections now. Things seem a little better for us right now. Alders, I don't know if you agree, but we're not quite as in desperate straits. So maybe we need to stretch and try to start this.
Is anything kind of like gunning for that contingency fund yet for the balance of the year? Anything that you can predict that might come before us that would require the use of that fund?
We're currently sitting at $143,000. We so far agreed to pay for those sandbags, which was a couple $100. And the other item is any items that were for litigation for GP and maybe Green Bay Packaging. At this point, we've been taking the legal fees out of that contingency. I do not have an estimate on that but if that is, I don't have an estimate. I think last year we ended up taking somewhere under 10,000 out for legal fees. So the
yeah.
contingency is certainly an option. Whether or not there's an option to go out for bond or another borrowing this year, bonding is a allowable source for something, even though this is really intangible. It's the long year impact on this that would be allowable. And again, there was other options. We were hoping that we had some unbudgeted revenue maybe coming in from a service agreement that has not been assigned. That was something that we were hoping that would have been signed and that we could have tried to use that money toward this expenditure. So again, 2020, yep, right now the money's not set aside. But again, contingency, bonding are probably your two sources at this point if you want to get this started and try to move it along in the shorter time period.
I think I'm comfortable with contingency. Does anyone feel the same that would want to make that motion that we start it?
Maybe if I would, so one thing I would just clarify that I'm not comfortable with bonding. I personally think bonding should be an option that's off the table. But if we were to use the contingency fund, maybe I would, rather than trying to use up more than half of it to allow us to do this, I would ask our purchasing manager, do you think that we could negotiate with the vendor here to reduce the $81,000 that's required in 2020? Do you think we could bring that down to say maybe 50 and then allocate that other 30 over the next 2 years? So that way we don't have to use too much of our contingency fund.
Sure, that's absolutely something we can bring to the table to them. I think given what we've had and based on their response, I think they would like to get going sooner than later. So I have a feeling they probably would work with us to do that. So
that's a great idea.
Go back to them and negotiate.
I would second that.
All right,
I'll
so
second
make that motion, Brian Johnson. Okay.
So I move that we engage in an agreement with option 1, authorizing up to $50,000 from our 2020 contingency fund and spreading the balance of the contract over 21 and 22 under the direction of the purchasing manager to negotiate that agreement.
Diana is writing, and she continues to write.
I like the motion. It's fantastic. There's one more item I want to discuss, and it doesn't have anything to do with the pricing or timeline. It is the very last item, discussion of a communication strategy, and I think that is very, very important. I think that's a critical step in this process. Doesn't cost us anything. I want to understand, and we have to discuss internally through alders, through Chief Jeffries, how do we get the communication out to our constituents that a reassessment doesn't necessarily mean their bill is going to go up.
Good.
So unfortunately, we have opened up the can of worms by putting this on our agenda. So don't be surprised. There's a chance an alder is going to get a phone call in the next couple of days, in the next week, that they're talking reassessment and they might be concerned their bill and their assessment is going to go up. And again, we have to start talking a strategy. I know Chief of Staff Jeffries had put it on her list of things to do is talk about a communication strategy. But if you have suggestions, recommendations, we certainly want to put it in a simple form so people can understand that. But that is just something that as alders, you're the ones potentially going to be getting phone calls, including city staff. And we certainly need to start thinking about how we would move forward and try to make this clear and that it's really meant to equalize everyone out, or everyone, and it doesn't necessarily mean their tax bill will go up.
Do we put this on our agenda next time to think about strategies? I think that might be a good idea to think about this. Alders?
I don't know if that's necessarily a finance committee role. I think that's probably a staff responsibility.
Okay.
Sure. There's media releases and other things that can be done, things that can be posted to in fact, it'd probably be better if they gave us something that we could just post on our social media platforms to announce
Yeah,
it to
that's
people.
true.
So it's the same message in the same way from top down.
Okay, so again, really why I wanted to mention that is just truly to know that we know it's important, and the more, hopefully, the more information we can give and communication we can give out there ahead of time, hopefully will stop some of those
Panic phone
president,
calls, yeah.
yeah, phone calls and people that hopefully we can give them more information so that they aren't so panicked by it. That it,
Right.
and again, some people are still going to be worried about it, but maybe we can try to relieve some of that panic. So I'm going to put Russ, the assessor, on the spot. I know he at some point he has some concerns about this timeline. He thinks it's pretty tight if we were to try to move forward with this. I guess I would like to, Russ, any other comment at this point on timeline?
No, I guess if the concern is to get the mill rate lower for 2023, I understand that. I want the best product for the city as possible, and giving us an extra year, depending upon what happens in the market. And that's my main concern. I mean, if we were to all of a sudden to take the rates were to go up and everything was to stop, that would change the market dramatically. And I don't see that happening, but I don't profess to have a magic wand or a crystal ball to see what's going to happen. So I'll do whatever the council wants me to do. And I think just the possibility of doing this has got me excited. But what I can do for you as on the communication side, I will have staff and myself will put together kind of a type of a press release that we will give to all the aldermen so that you will be speaking with a unified tongue as far as what we will be talking about when we get calls. And then when you get a call, if you're not comfortable with answering questions they have, we can always direct them back to my office. But some of the general questions they will have will be in that type of press release, and then you'll be able to refer to it and answer whatever questions. And if it gets too difficult for what they have, just send them back to us, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. But as far as the timeline goes, that's definitely up to you. My preference would be longer because of the way the market is kind of fluctuating. But if that's not something that is in the cards, that's something that the firm is willing to do on a shorter period of time, that's fine with me.
Okay, so
Yep.
we have a motion on the floor. Is there still more? You must tell us, Diana.
No, nope. I was going to thank Russ, and I was just going to say thank Russ, but I would think, and even if we got it started, and in a year and a half from now, they let's say our appraiser, our assessor, and our evaluation team says, you know what, we would have better results if we waited in another year. It's not going to cost us more, and we could actually potentially delay the delay which assessment roll we go on. But if we don't start now, there's no way we'll be able to do the 1/1 of 22. So I think we still have the option of if Russ at some point or the assessor is concerned about how the numbers are shaken out, or the market, or how things are, the numbers, again, what the market is showing, we could still bring it back and discuss, maybe delaying it a year. But we can't do that if we don't start.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think in my motion, I would want it to state that it's expected that the work be completed 2022, anticipating that 2023 is when this goes online. And understanding again that staff, if they hit a roadblock, that they can come back to us. But I think I want my motion to state that's sort of the expectation of the contract.
Yeah.
Are we ready to vote?
Yep.
I'm done.
I think we need
Okay. All right. All those in favor of, is there a second? Did you
Yeah, we
second
need a
it, Alder Galvin?
Yes.
You did. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And I'd like to know how many dirty dishes Alder Galvin had on his kitchen sink to get his assessment reduced by 40,000.
You know,
He didn't mop the floor for months.
it was the four girls running around.
All right, review the number 7, item 7, review the City of Green Bay's 1033 program inventory. This looks like an exciting agenda item.
Yes. Yes, I actually don't know a lot about this one, but I believe Commander Warwick hopefully is on the line. And this is something that the mayor has asked that a inventory was brought to the finance committee, and then if any new items were ever purchased for the 1033 program, that it would be brought to the attention of the finance, which would also be to the council. So Commander Warwick, are you on the phone, on the line?
I don't think he is, but I'm here.
Oh,
Chief Smith is here. Yeah.
tell us all about the 1033
All right.
program.
Okay, so in a nutshell, the 1033 program is where we get evidence or items from the Department of Defense that they no longer need. And these items can be things like scopes, or they can be weapons, or they can be vehicles. In the past, we have got a forklift, got pickup trucks, we've got an ice maker, we've got an elliptical machine, we've got Camelback hydration systems for officers, long underwear to wear underneath their dive suits, all kinds of things that they get.
That's pretty exciting. And what brings this to us today? Is it
So
the
I think
night vision
it's
goggles?
sometimes controversial, Alderdorf, that people will get things like armored personnel carriers. They'll
that,
get
yes.
assistance systems that are controversial. They'll get other things like this that don't really fit in with what we're doing here in Green Bay. I'm pretty careful about the things I get. We get a lot of guys that want to get some really cool stuff, and several times in the past I've said, you know what, that's really not something we need here in the city of Green Bay. Let's find something else. So the mayor would like us to do two things. One, have you review the 1033 list quarterly, which you have in front of you. Those are the items that we have. And if we get any new items before we take full acceptance of those, he wants me to run them by the committee here and make sure that you don't have any problem with the things that we're getting.
So why I asked that question was I thought the stuff in yellow was the new stuff. I thought that's why you were bringing us some new stuff. Do you know what the highlighted stuff is?
Yeah, that highlighted stuff is stuff we're sending back because it wasn't as advertised. It's a lot of night vision things, but the key component of it was missing. That would be the liquid tubes that are inside that would allow people to work. What we basically have here are just the shells, so that's all getting sent back.
Oh, okay, that helps explain that. All right, Alders.
I would
Just
have
one
to say that,
Yeah.
go ahead,
Alder,
Brian.
yeah, Alder, okay. Alder
Sorry.
Johnson.
All right, beauty before age. Got it.
No,
Yeah,
No.
that's it.
Chief, I'm looking at this and I'd just like you to confirm, because I feel like, you know, the description, a lot of these is fairly obvious, but when I'm looking at this, what I am seeing is a Green Bay Police Department that is not militarized. Would you agree with that characterization?
I would completely agree with that. Yes, sir. We have, we have really tried to not militarize ourselves, and we get things like, the Camelbacks or whatever. That's certainly something that you can buy. Anything on here that we have, for the most part, can be bought at Nelson Tactical or at Cabela's.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alder Galvin.
and I would have to just to pony back in on that. There's a lot of misconception out in the public media. When someone says police department have tanks, they don't have tanks. What they have are armored carriers, which allow you to drive into a scene and survive having someone firing armor-piercing rounds at your person. There's no cannons, there's no mounted armaments on that other than stuff that will stop bullets. Although we did get one years ago that turned out it wasn't bulletproof, but I mean, you live and learn. But we've gotten a lot of useful equipment. If you look at this is all stuff that we would have purchased for the department. It has saved the city taxpayers an unbelievable amount of money. And as you can see though, this is not brand new equipment by any means. The stuff we get is sometimes pretty dated and it's not always functional. And so here we are sending a lot of it back because it doesn't work.
Right.
So I understand people's concerns, but I would have to agree this has been nothing but a boon for the city and for the department. And it's not militarized. These are weapons and things that the department would have purchased regardless. So that's just my
Thank you.
2 cents.
All right. So what kind of a motion do we need on this? Like receive and place on file?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Alder Galvin,
Second?
second by Alder Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor to receive and place on file, say aye.
All right.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Next chief is up, the other chief. Consideration with possible action on the purchase of type 1 ambulance for the Green Bay Metro Fire Department for the sum of $261,617 from Jefferson Fire and Safety, the lowest responsible bidder for RFQ 3266. Chief Litton.
Well, I guess I would defer to the purchasing manager. They run the bid on the,
Okay.
but the ambulance is replacing the ambulance at Station 2, which is one of the old Ford or van chassis. We've moved to all the smaller truck chassis now with a 4-wheel drive for getting around the city in all the wonderful weather we have. So this bid is just a little bit higher than last year's bid, which we were pretty surprised about. So we were happy with where it came in at.
Alders, do you have any questions on this?
I would make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion made by Alder Galvin to approve.
If I can,
Yes, Kelvin? Yes.
so I just want to add in one thing. You will see that, so the way we bid this out as a 3-year contract. By no means are you awarding a 3-year contract here with this, but we asked for the vendors to provide us pricing based on a percentage increase from the previous year for the subsequent years. So just so you know, if this does come back next year or the following year, it will be again to Jefferson Fire and Safety based on the percentage increase that they provided, which seems to be in line with what we're seeing for typical increases on an annual basis.
Okay,
Alderdorf, just one question.
yes.
Calvin, when we're looking at this, how many responses did you get to the RFP?
This one, we only had one response that came in. There was another response that was started, but it was not completed. Not quite sure that the vendor that was in there did not provide any contact information. With the recent COVID, we've switched to a system where we receive our bids electronically. There was one vendor that had started a bid, but did not complete it. We didn't have any way of contacting them. So Jefferson Fire and Safety, historically for the last 2 years now, has been the only one that has submitted a bid on this.
Okay, and the reason I ask is because under normal circumstances, if we had multiple bids, you would provide those bids for us to review, correct?
Correct. Yes, I would provide you the full bid summary with all the vendors.
Okay, and I just wasn't sure if we were only getting the winning bid put in front of us, and that's why I asked the question. And recognizing that Chief had indicated that this price is in alignment with the last purchase, I'm comfortable with it. So, in the motion, I don't know if you caught that, Alderdorf.
Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, so Alder Galvin, moved by Alder Galvin, second by Alder Johnson. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Item 9, request approval for the purchase of Mitel phone system from CCCP off the Sourcewell Group Purchasing Cooperative Contract. Staff.
Okay, in your packet, there was nothing included because
No,
we
right.
were trying to get the most up-to-date quote and information for this phone system. We just recently borrowed $250,000 in the 2020 borrowing for this phone system. As of today, and Director Haranik is on the phone, we did get a quote for $178,000 for this phone system. However, that does not include install, and there's a few other add-ons that still need to be included. But I'm actually going to turn it over to the director, and if you have any questions on this quote.
Director Haranik.
Do you have any questions?
So it's about $80,000 less than what we bonded, which coincidentally is what we needed for the.
No,
Yeah.
but he has to add some stuff.
I was waiting for that question. But as Director Ellenbecker has said, we're also going to need to purchase an add-on nuisance call handler. And this is primarily for the police department. And then also a Mitel Revolution, it's like a messaging alerting service that if someone in the building, somebody could just type the numbers in a phone and a pre-recorded message could come through everybody's phones or speakers in the ceilings in conference rooms.
Right. I've heard of that.
I what I would like to add, and I know the director can add to it, some of the things that what's going to be good about the system is, as we move forward, if we get approval to move forward with this, maybe up to the 250,000 that we borrowed, this new phone system, the director thinks we can have in prior to the elections. And the huge advantage to that is that's going to have some kind of like center, which would help funnel phone calls to take some of phone calls away from the clerk's office.
Oh, good.
It's you talked about better reporting and transcription. It would allow us to do more work from home where the calls can be forwarded from home. So there are a lot of advantages to the system. So those are, again, once the code is in, plus the install and these couple other upgrades that we need, and that's because the system worked really well, that will fall closer to our 250,000 that was borrowed.
I knew you'd spend it.
Yeah.
All right, any other discussion?
I would move that we approve with the contingency that the supporting documentation be included in the city council.
True. I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you. 10, request for the approval of amendment to the cell tower lease at the Ted Fritsch Park.
I am going to turn that right over to our procurement manager.
I don't
Okay.
see anything here.
So this is, the next two items here are both cell tower lease items. From time to time, these companies will come to us and ask for amendments to their original leases. So with this one, the Ted Fritsch Park, this is one that it's an AT&T tower. The rental tower, which is American Tower, came to us, and basically the way it was explained is AT&T is kind of a bully when it comes to its cell towers. And basically if they don't get the terms that they want, they will pull their dishes and pull their equipment off of a tower and find a tower that will be suitable to them. So American Tower came to us, asked us if we would modify this lease to make them more competitive within the market. So we did look at that. We agreed with that. The law department went through these amendments or these addendums, and we did come up with an agreement. So the reason that we did decide to do this, we have 30-year leases, but those leases are in kind of 5-year increments. So next year is an option year. So that would be the opportunity for the company to just drop the lease altogether, at which point we would lose all revenue for that. So we decided this was a good decision to go forward with granting the amendment to the tower lease for this one.
Kevin, is there time sensitivity on this?
Yes. So
Let me tell you why I'm asking the question. I personally feel very uncomfortable passing any type of an amendment to a contract without any type of supporting paperwork.
And there's
Okay.
nothing here. I mean, there's,
Right.
Okay, so what exactly do they want the amendment to be? Just, can you restate that?
yeah, let me pull up the full document here.
I mean, and so when I say time sensitivity, does it have to be done at this meeting, or can it wait until the next finance committee meeting when we have time to get the paperwork to support the request?
But then it's another whole month to the city council meeting. I mean,
And that's why I'm asking if there's time to do that.
So these companies are preferred to have that, time sensitive, because this has been going on. We've been working on these for almost 2 months now, going back and forth between the legal departments with the tower companies and the city.
what if you just had the paperwork in for council, like Alder Johnson asked the last time? And we're
Sure.
like,
I could absolutely include, would you prefer that the full amendment be included, or would you summary of what is changing?
what?
a summary of what, yeah, go
I
ahead.
would like a
Alder Gallagher.
summary. I mean, I have no idea what we're giving up here.
Okay.
If we're giving up anything, or we're going to be losing money on this or anything else. So, I mean, it's
Okay.
hard for me to vote on something. I mean, I trust you, to be doing a good job and everything, but if someone asks me, well, what were the changes? I have to be able to tell them. It should be open to public record. as to what these changes are.
And I can absolutely work up some sort of summary document for the council meeting.
So,
Just wanna tell us, yeah.
Even as it relates to today, I just, again, I still feel uncomfortable voting on something where I have zero idea what I'm voting on. So I'm wondering, given the time sensitivity of this, if this could be placed as a committee of the whole without any recommendation from Finance Committee. I don't know how we make a recommendation of something we don't know what we're doing.
Two things. First of all, secondly, we can send it to council with no recommendation. And then council can decide. We don't need to do committee of the whole. I mean, it doesn't have to be. It can just be, let's pull the item, you know? So can you explain a little more what we're agreeing to?
Yeah, I'm pulling up the documentation for it
Okay.
now. Just trying to pull up the law department's. I want to use the law department's explanation, just because they are the ones who went through everything. So let me pull that documentation quick.
I do see that Attorney Chavez is on the online. However, I know one of her assistants are the ones who worked on the cell tower agreements. Not sure if Vanessa, you have any comments on these cell tower changes?
Attorney Chavez, are you there?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not actually familiar with these. Joanne is very thorough when she does her contracts, though. I do agree that the contracts need to be provided to you so that you are voting on. I have asked Attorney Bunger if she's available to hop on the call to provide you guys with an update as to what changes she made. So I don't know if you want to put this one on hold and we'll come back to it.
Would that be the same for the next one, for the Fisk Park lease too? Similar?
So the Fisk Park lease, that
We don't have to talk, let's don't talk about, but yes or no? Do we need to wait on that?
the Fisk Park lease is a little bit different situation than this amendment.
Okay, so we'll wait.
They're two different situations. This one is being kind of driven by the providers, whereas the other one is it's a little different.
Since we did not provide the backup at all, I mean, even if we discuss it, would you prefer us just to put a summary together of the changes for each one of the amendments, and then we can also include a full copy of the agreement? They're rather long, but we certainly can include them in either packet.
Can you include a red line? Can it be something as simple as a redlined agreement?
So this is a full amendment, a full new amendment. There's multiple amendments. This is amendment number 2 to this lease. So it's a full new amendment. So there's nothing that was necessarily redlined. It's a full new amendment to the agreement.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Why don't we just, I don't know, what should we do? Send to council without recommendation?
Yeah, I think if we do that, and then in the council packet, if we can include the actual verbiage of the amendment and maybe a summary of the impact of the change.
Yeah, that's right. That sounds good.
Yep, we can do that.
All right, so let's have a motion to that effect. Alder Johnson.
That is my motion to that effect.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll second that.
So the motion is to send this to council without a recommendation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And then if the summaries are in there, we'll talk about it at council, right? Right. All right. And okay, so now item 11, request for the approval of the amendment cell tower lease at Fisk Park. Is there more information on that, or do we need to do the same thing?
I
would suggest you do the same. I can give you a kind of a rundown of why this one's different. So this one, the provider that was on the tower pulled their equipment off the tower. So this one is really the leasing company, the American Tower coming to us and asking for us to essentially reduce their rent payments until they are able to get a new tenant on the tower. It is a revenue sharing situation, so it's not a situation where American Tower is just trying to reduce their rent. They're getting monies and they're getting profit from somebody being on the tower, so they're actively looking for a new tenant for the tower as well. So this change was more driven by, they don't have any way that they're generating money right now, so they requested a reduction in rent. Once a new tenant goes back on the tower, everything would revert back to where it was.
And what would be the impact on our budget for not getting this revenue?
I would have to.
I mean,
we had a breakdown, yeah.
We could include that in the summary of changes that is included for the council packet.
All right, let's do that.
So
Because I
we'll,
think we still have to identify a source for that then. Right?
of how we we're using that money, which we probably were using that money for something.
Yeah, I know we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars, but
Okay.
it is a reduction. So, and what could easily happen, you could pass this and in that time they could find a new tenant and, the amendment would be moot point. But
Okay.
regardless, we still need to make sure that we move forward. So yeah, we can definitely provide that information in our summary to the council.
Okay.
But what I do want to add, though, Calvin, or to the elders, is the original agreement we had with them said if there is no revenue coming in, it was a revenue share. This amendment isn't saying that they can pay us less. It was just updating our documents, getting them up to date, and there were some other tweaks to it. No matter what, that revenue potentially was going to be less because there was not somebody bringing in the revenue. So this is not just to accept a lower rent payment. There were other changes, and this was inevitable and was going to happen. Through discussions, I think they brought this to us in December or January, and we have been working on this. So we've actually delayed the reduction for a period of time already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would just replicate my motion. I would move that we refer this to full council without a recommendation, contingent upon staff providing documentation of the exact verbiage of the amendment and a summary.
Beautiful.
I would second that, but I would have one quick question. Is this normal nation in time for our committee meetings, or was there just something that you just couldn't get?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there.
Right.
I guess my concern here is we have two items which we on, and like Alder Johnson said, it's very difficult for us to make any decisions. It's even harder for us when we can't even review it in advance of the meeting. And I'm just wondering if this is something that normally goes on. I mean, I don't remember experiencing this before, or if there was some kind of just a paper shuffle mistake here.
So we had discussed, me and Director Ellenbecker had discussed, what kind of documentation we wanted to include, including we decided not to include the full amendment given the length of them.
Sure.
If it's something that you want to see, it's absolutely something we will provide. But yet these cell tower companies, they do approach us often, from what I can understand. And a lot of times they're unfound, but given that these two are in renewal years next year, and they could drop the lease altogether, which would be a complete loss of the revenue, we thought it would be prudent to make sure we basically hedge our risk and at least continue to get revenue on the towers.
Okay.
All right, then.
I think it's clear that we need information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And thank you. And we'll get that. All right. Did we already vote?
No.
I don't know. All right. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nope. Motion carries. All right. I was an aye. Okay. All right. The next two items, all right. I think we can talk about this first item without Alder Wery being here, because he and I already talked about this. And so, oh, come on, agenda. a request by Alder Weary for the Finance Committee, which states offer a pay incentive bonus for poll workers who have worked and will work this year during COVID-19 situation. Okay, we talked about that, and that's happening already because of the grant. Okay,
Right.
so we don't really need to do anything with that. We'll do that under the grant. The second part, adopt a policy for future hazard pay situations. He would like that referred to staff to research other hazard pay policies if this would occur in the future. So that part of it is what we really need to discuss if we want to refer that to staff.
Just an update, that is actually what Alder Galvin recommended last meeting, was to refer to staff to research the hazard pay situations. It's the second time it's come around. So yes, the first item, number one, correct. Based on what I also heard at the ad hoc committee, I think Alder Weary understands that at least for this year, we would be looking at using some grant money to help pay for additional money for this incentive. Number two, Clerk Teske actually went out and she tried to find some additional hazard pays. I also went online and tried to find some examples of existing, and I was not able to find any at the time when Clerk Teske did a research, and for cities, I believe they were all within the state of Wisconsin. She did not get any response back, and I can let Clerk Teske talk if she would like. But at this point, I do not have one to bring to you an example from other municipalities. So if it's something we need to try to create, we can move forward with that. We can work with our attorneys. We could try to, or our HR, or our policy. But in our limited time, we and kind of trying to see what happened at the ad hoc and with the whole incentive and bonus, we do not at this point have any hazard to bring to you.
And yes, let's go with Alder Galvin first this time.
All right. I just think that based on the first part of his item would receive and place on file, and the second time, since we've already addressed this for the upcoming election, we have time. We could table it until he can come and give us some parameters of what he's looking for, or if staff wants to make a proposal for future hazard pay situations. It could be next time.
Yeah. Okay, Alder Johnson.
Well, and I don't mean to split hairs on this, but would the topic of hazard pay be more appropriately situated with personnel?
Yes, could be.
In which case, then I have no problem with us like exploring future hazard pay policies. I just think that perhaps that should go to Joe or Director Falds as opposed to Director Ellenbecker. So my question is can we as a finance committee refer that to staff and then have Director Falds bring it back, but bring it back to personnel? Can we do that?
Or can we just refer?
Attorney Chavez. Yes, the short answer is yes, you can do that. So you'd essentially be redirecting it to a different committee, but you're sending it to staff before that. So there's no issue with that.
Okay. I just don't want to send it like to refer to personnel here and then it gets delayed more, right? So in which case then I would make a motion that we refer this to staff, and staff being human resources, and then have them bring back a proposal to the personnel committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, so that's for part two. And
yes, for the hazard pay policy.
Okay, so that's for part two. So we'll deal with that first then. So any further discussion on adopt a policy for future hazard pay situations have been referred to staff?
I would just expand on that a little bit, Alderdorf, meaning that I think it should be a complete reevaluation of hazard pay. I mean, because I'm sure that's pretty broad, right? I mean, hazard pay could be impacted by a lot of different things.
Well, I know.
Elections.
Right.
So to me, it's just a reevaluation of hazard pay across our different departments, just to make sure that they're brought up to speed.
Okay, Alder Galvin, were you raising your hand?
I'm just stretching my fingers.
Well, don't do that, because then I think you're raising your hand. Okay, okay, so that's the motion, and you seconded it, Alder Galvin? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. And then the first part was receive and place on file?
correct.
Okay, made by Alder Galvin,
Second.
second by Alder Johnson. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Now this next one, I don't know how we could do this without Alder Weary here.
Well, I guess my question on this would be, do we need him here to have an explanation from, and I would imagine it's going to be the law department, giving us update on why the city has agreed to indemnify the former mayor?
Well,
And I don't see why that can't be in the public record, because the explanation is just the explanation of why has the city agreed to do it. I don't see why. I'd have to have a pretty compelling reason to go into closed.
Attorney Chavez? Who may still
I
be.
see no issue.
Okay.
No, it's just it takes me a little bit. My phone is dying, and so it takes longer to light back up to unmute it. That's all that's happening. So I don't see any issue with us discussing the reason we've already taken certain actions in the case in open session, because those are decisions that have already been made and they're just applications of law.
Exactly.
If we start talking about an actual update on the case and strategy and stuff, that's when I would recommend we go into closed session.
Sure.
Okay, including the city's role. Okay, so he wants update on this, on the lawsuit, include the city's role, and why the city has agreed to indemnify the former mayor. So of that, in open session, we could probably do why the city's agreed to indemnify the former mayor, but not everything.
Well, to me, isn't it, I thought it was pretty well stated through the media not too long ago that the case has been delayed until next year, and the reasons were given in the media, unless something has changed since then. Again, I don't think we need to go into closed session. That's all been pretty much made public.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what Alder Weary is requesting this. So what questions does the committee have then?
Well, I feel like we received an update from staff, the confidential update that we received through email. And then, so I feel like that kind of meets that request. But then the question of why the city's agreed to indemnify the former mayor, I can't imagine a scenario where any government entity would not indemnify its leaders, and not just government. I mean, that's in the private sector too. I mean, we do that even with our board of directors. We buy insurance to indemnify our board members. I mean, that's a very, very common practice.
So Attorney Chavez, do you have anything to add to that you can say in open session?
Yes. So if you guys refer back to the email that I sent you guys in closed session, we do have an explanation directly from outside counsel explaining what the litigations are. But for me to just give you a brief update, it is based on the fact that the actions that he sued for were taken in his official capacity as mayor. And so anytime a person takes action within the scope of their duties, or in their official capacity, I should say, then they are entitled to a defense by law. And so it's not that we have chosen to indemnify him, we're actually providing a defense for the former mayor.
Okay, because you have to, we have to, by law. Okay. Okay.
All right. I'm satisfied with that.
File.
And I'll second that.
Okay, move to receive and file by Alder Johnson, second by Alder Galvin. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And lastly, the report of the Claims Committee, which
I have
there's a lot.
I have no questions on the claims.
I have no questions. Alder Johnson?
I am working on that. Sorry. Because it wasn't in the packet, I wasn't logged in and I didn't see it.
Okay, that's okay. There's a lot.
That I've got no conflicts here.
Yeah, okay. Yep, we'll give you a minute.
And then I'll be sure to review the details before the council meeting. Okay, I'm good.
Okay, motion to,
Receive and place on file.
all right, made by Alder Galvin, Second by Alder Johnson. Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Informational? Oh, here we go. The contingency account is $143,700, but it'll soon be less than that when we get what we agreed to do earlier in the meeting. And then the next Finance Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, August 11th, 2020, which is actually Election Day at 4:30 p.m.
I have a question, and Brian, same thing. I'm now going to be a poll worker along with my wife.
Yeah.
And Brian also.
Yeah, I think we better not have it on that day.
Should we move it to Monday or Tuesday?
Well,
I mean Wednesday. Monday
we
or
probably
Wednesday.
can't put on top of another committee. Okay, Director Ellenbecker, and you're muted, so I don't know what you're saying.
Potentially, like you said, the problem is if we do Monday or Wednesday, like you said, we do end up being over the top of other meetings, and that, you know, sometimes we're restricted by the Zoom account.
About the fourth?
We can overlap.
Yeah.
I've got Shelby here, and she says we can overlap. So I think we'd be all right, as long as aldermen don't have a conflict.
Well, it depends on overlap with what, but how about, so we
This is
couldn't move it to the
Celestine.
4th? Yes.
We could overlap, but I think it just would be better not to have the meeting on the second Monday. There are a lot of meetings on the second Monday. And then, of course, Wednesday is INS and Parks, and could have it the week before.
We want to meet on
I
the
just,
4th?
so that everyone can attend, I think that would be best.
I think August 4th would be.
August 4th. Yep,
What about
August
10
4th,
o'clock?
4:30.
We're done with the polling locations.
What did you say?
I said, what about 10 o'clock when we're done with the polling locations?
Oh, yeah, you'll be really energized
really
at that
cute.
point.
Yeah, you're
All
a
right.
dandy.
You know, the jokes fall flat when nobody reacts the first time.
We were too stunned. We were just too stunned at what you said. All right, 4:30 on the 4th, Finance and Personnel probably, but,
I will let Director Falls know.
okay.
All right.
Anything else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Could I just, one quick question, Alderdorf? And this is whether, I don't know if this would be for you, Alderdorf, or for Director Ellenbecker, but one of the things I noticed, and this has been on other committees that I've served on too, sometimes we have individuals who are on the phone, you know, where they have one item they need to tend to, right? And they 2 hours of conversation to hit their 5-minute item. And I always kind of feel bad about that. When we consider sort of the order of the agenda, is it random, or do we consider that at all?
I can tell you this one, we moved around several times. So I grouped the first 3 because we had an outside vendor. We had someone from Baird and put those 3 together. Then the next 2, they could have probably been pushed down farther. Then the next 3, next there were a couple items for, Calvin, our procurement manager. So he had 5 items together. So I kind of grouped them that way. And so there was some thought and put into them. At some point, I grouped the 2 together, and then on top of it, I try to group the one that, so there is some thought to it, but I do try to move them around. I try to consider, unfortunately, like I'm not sure who in particular you're talking about, but I did try to, Chris Teskey, I tried to have hers, the clerk Teskey together. So I did try to move them around and try to, so I get people off the phone as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's not a specific request necessarily about tonight. It's a general statement. I've seen this in other committees. And so I'm just trying to obviously be as courteous as possible to all of our staff as well, who have families they'd love to get to in the night as well. And so I'm happy to hear that you put thought into it. That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Did we adjourn already? No.
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.
Bye.
Thanks,
all.
everybody. Bye-bye.